Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. I think it's a new one, so let's go for it. Serious. What's the creepiest thing that has ever happened to you while at work? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Sexually harassed and ultimately fired after complaining. I was a 16-year-old high school student and male. This was in 96 or 97, and no one cared until I told my mom, and she told me it was sexual harassment. I now know why women keep that stuff secret. The shame and embarrassment I felt was insane. Thanks for helping me, Mom. I worked at a bank. We were giving kids a tour. One of the parents was in the lobby and played a prank on me. He passed me a note and pretended he was robbing me. I hadn't seen him before he did this, and for about 10 to 15 seconds, I thought we were being robbed with a boatload of children behind the counter. There was a dad from my son's school who found out where I worked, what car was mine, and that I was going through a divorce. He asked me out, and I said no. After I said no and gave absolutely no hope for any future dates, conversation, contact. I said no. He started showing up at my job to see me and cornering me so I couldn't get away. A couple work friends would see him coming and send me off to the staff room to get me away from him. He left flowers on my car while I was at work. I was incredibly creeped out and a single mom with young children. I got a guy from work to stay by my side as often as he could, and after a while of seeing work guy around me, stalker guy started to leave me alone. I'm a realtor and showed a creepy old 19th century Victorian home, think Addams Family House, on Halloween night. It was one building but originally two units, which had since been co-joined, so it was a real maze. Multiple kitchens and living rooms, easy to get turned around. It was a foreclosure with no power, so we only had our phones to light the way. Foreclosures always have smoke and carbon monoxide detectors chirping away due to low batteries. But this house had one that said low battery in a mechanical voice, but the battery was so low, it came out like low battery in a dying robot voice. So there we were, three of us on Halloween night inside a dark home that's creepy at noon in July, getting all turned around, and somewhere we hear low battery. Man, we effed out of there quick. I was doing the trash at my previous job. I worked at a gas station in a little town. Some random dude started flirting with me and creeped around the outside of the store until my shift was up and followed me home because at the time I had to walk to and from work. This was at 11 p.m. too. Sometimes when I read these stories, I'm like, there's no way people like this exist and actually behave this way. And then I talk to friends of mine and they've told me some horror stories of their past, and unfortunately they do. And they think it's fine. I was living and working at a commune, a farm, and restaurant in one. I had been there for quite some time, and the owner started insinuating that I was castrated and that the whole world was some kind of sect that functions around prostitution. He also started hinting towards cannibalism at his place and that human meat was to be compared to pork. There was someone of his acquaintances that, during one of the dinners, started talking about how traditionally pigs are castrated because of how the testosterone made the meat taste bad. They also kept on talking about guns, and they kept bringing guns around to the area. I did not feel safe there. Was working for the day in a government building I hadn't visited before. Our company had one floor in it that I was told was on the floor in use. The company were planning to vacate at the end of the year. At lunchtime, I decided to explore and got off the elevator on a random floor. It was an open plan office. All the desks still had work on them, and a large table still had the remains of a party. Paper plates and food. A lot of the desks had slices of cake on them untouched. A party banner was still up that said, "Congratulations." One office was open, and the walls were covered with x-ray slides of different people, every surface covered with more on the floor. To my untrained eye, they all seemed to have large shadows growing in them. Weird. This was years before social media or camera phones, so I had another quick look around and got back in the elevator. When the doors opened on my floor, I was met by armed police officers. This was London, and seeing an armed cop was very rare. who asked me why I'd been on the other floor. I told him I was just curious and on my lunch break, and he warned me that I was only allowed to access to this floor and to not break protocol again. No one in the office I was visiting knew anything about it. No one had ever seen police there or ever explored the other floors. This doesn't really compare to most, but I'm from and lived all my life in Texas. I moved to Boca Raton, Florida for a year to get clean when I was 18. I was working as an assistant manager at a party city. Some Karen New Yorker reaches across the counter and grabbed my shirt and pulled me forward because she was pissed off about something and she wanted to see my name tag. I could not believe it. Nobody would do that from where I was from and not expect trouble. When the shock wore off, I calmly told her to get her hands off of me, or I would beat her unconscious. She looked at me like I had 10 heads. When I was 15, I worked in retail, and an older man, probably 40s, was following me around sizing me up. I seriously did laps around the store just to see if he really was following. Eventually, fed up, I said politely, "Can I help you with something?" And he said, "Maybe. What time do you get off work?" I laughed, thinking it was a joke, and he just dead stared at me. "What time do you get off? Will it be dark?" I told him it's none of his business, and he said, "Well, you want to help me, don't you?" And he wrapped his arm around my waist. My coworker, a man around his age, saw what was happening and assaulted the dude, punched him in the face, and swore him out of the store. He wrote the guy's license plate down and said he didn't hear the conversation, but I looked scared, and he asked if I wanted the cops called. I was freaked out and didn't want to acknowledge it ever happened, so I said no. Regret that every day. Who knows how many people he did that to after. A few things over the years. I've had men pick me up and carry me into the bathroom, had men run their canes up my legs, been licked, cleaned up blood from about half a dozen people who wandered in while shock after car accidents, gained a few stalkers, had a drug dealer threaten to make me disappear after he went on a bender and swore I stole his radio, what have you. Worst was while I was working overnight completely alone, just one block from where a woman was severely beaten and left for dead in a vacant lot. Police said I came into contact with the suspect mere hours before the incident during my shift. I worked in a hospital pharmacy, and it was just me and one other running it for the hospital, and we'd like to turn off like 80% of the lights because hospital lights are offending to the eyes, especially during hours your body normally would want to sleep. Well, I came into the pharmacy after delivering something, and I saw my coworker in the medication pick area, which was enclosed and only had one way in or out, and I was talking to him about something that had happened on the floor, literally seeing him look at the medications as I was talking, but then my coworker goes, "What?" And he poked his head out from all the way in the back of the pharmacy, and I looked back and there wasn't anyone in the med pick area. I 100% saw someone standing there and talked to them for a few minutes. The pharmacy was located in the basement along with the morgue, and it's locked. Only pharmacy employees have access to the hospital pharmacy. Not even security has access. Scariest experience I have had. I told a coworker about it when morning shift came in, and she told me a week prior her water bottle started moving from a dead standstill. I worked at a makerspace. I greeted people as they came in. People told me about their projects, and I tried to help them make their dreams come true. This guy comes in and starts telling me about his project and says, "I have it in my car. Can you come take a look?" So I oblige. We go to his car, and there's a dead dog in his car. He then tells me there's no project, and he actually just needs money to bury his dead dog. I ripped into that dude for luring me away from work, then ambushing me with a dead effing dog. I was so disturbed. Imagine if he was trying to do something more nefarious. Anyway, I learned that day to never let people take you to a second location. They gotta bring their projects inside. That's great advice for any work environment as well as nightlife and socializing with people as well. Once you go to a secondary location, the risk goes up, so just be mindful. That's all. When I was about 22, female, I worked at a group home for developmentally disabled individuals. The house manager was a man named Mark. Mark had some kind of god complex. He was mad that I had time off to visit family in Oregon, approved by the main office. He didn't want to find someone to cover. He had weeks to plan. He told me I couldn't go. I told him the time was approved and I was going to go. He wordlessly picked me up and slung me over his shoulder like a rag doll, walked quickly to a client's bedroom, and slammed me down on the bed. He stared into my face for a few seconds, then got up and left the house. Worst part? I never told any higher-ups, and only told my boyfriend years later after it was far, far too late. Why? I still wonder why. Most disturbing? Worked in an office, and our in-house IT dude was notoriously known for pooping without washing his hands. He wore super vibrant colored Nikes, and you could see them in the stall next to you. You'd hear him grunt while he was wiping. He would then pull his pants up, buckle up, open the stall, and then walk out the door. Guess whose poopy hands had to touch your computer if something effed was happening? Even more gross was that he always had super long fingernails. Ugh. That was back in 2015-2017. To this day, I keep Clorox wipes in my backpack or desk drawer. I work as a therapist. I was working in a substance abuse clinic in the early 2010s and had only been licensed a few years. There was a colleague of mine I went through my master's program with, who I was in my supervision group with, required for your first 2 years being a master's level clinician in my state, who got me the job there. We found out he had gotten fired on a Friday. We were all in shock, clients included, because he was fired with cause. Then on Monday, I was having sessions with one of my clients who said, I know why, because he was dating my daughter, who was one of his clients. Turns out, when I reported it to my supervisor, this allegation from my client became number 5 in a case we had to report to the state. He was having sex with a few of his clients, and in other cases, threatening to withhold take-home privileges for medication if they did not. We had other clients who would not go on record with the state, saying he made sexual advances on them while in session, including trying to touch their legs in his office on site. This was all happening right down the hallway from me. Fortunately, the state licensing board had a review, found the allegations substantial to revoke his license, then turned the case over to state police, who charged and convicted him with 4th-degree criminal sexual assault. He's done his time and has tried to keep working in the field as an unlicensed consultant or something, but has gotten in further trouble with the state for misrepresenting himself. On that note, 2 things. All of this is now in the public record in my state. I don't want to disclose where, as he already tried intimidating us when I told others in my field what was going on. If you ever see a therapist, always make sure they are licensed and look them up. Your state should have a database where you can research someone and see if their license is active or if there have been any complaints. A good therapist will make that info accessible. This post really turned out to be surprisingly informative and refreshing. This is great advice. If you're working with a therapist or any type of professional that needs licensing, just Google their license or whatever you can do to make sure they're legit. I remember working as a security guard for a hospital. I watched Certificate of Need patients. These were patients from our local asylum who were completely out of their mind. I did my 3rd shift ever for the company watching a guy who had picked up some pencils and stabbed a worker with it a couple times before turning a fresh one on himself and stabbing his own stomach 6 times. I took the 3rd shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. All I did was sit in the hallway outside his door in a mostly dead wing of the ICU. I maybe saw one person an hour. It was just me in a chair in the middle of a dead hallway for 12 hours of the night. I'm freshly 18 at this point and had little experience with anything like this. I made it about to 3 a.m. before passing out in my chair outside his door. I was awoken by the guy I was watching himself. He had broken his own wrist to slip out of the handcuffs, keeping him on the bed. He ripped his catheter and IV out. He tapped me on the shoulder to wake me up. I turned and looked at this man who was completely naked and bleeding from 2 places, holding his wrist, and he just said, "I need to pee." I decided to try and play it off like everything was normal as to not escalate the situation. I walked him to the bathroom and immediately called my CO while he was inside. My CO got there before he got out, and we used restraints to put him back on the bed. Nurses came back in and set him back up. My CO, not knowing that I fell asleep, said I did the right thing and that I'd do great at the job. He said he needed more people like me who didn't panic in situations like that and make things worse. I thanked him and then left at 7 a.m. I never came back to do another shift for that security company. I'm so lucky he didn't use his IV to stab me in the neck while I was sleeping.